Hello and welcome to the GPP Chin Music Podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at BChad50, and happy birthday to you, sir. It's your birthday, so that means Madison Bumgarner is going to throw a no-hitter for you tonight, right?
That's the birthday gift that I'm looking for.
Yeah, GPP win something. I mean, you'll take whatever you can get, but either way, Madison Bumgarner probably going to be a fairly popular play as far as top arms go. So maybe not a low-owned guy in tournaments, especially because a guy that we'll get to here in a few minutes is just incredibly cheap. So when we're talking GPP arms, we're looking for guys with lower ownership. So we'll go ahead and start off with a couple guys that you and I are looking at. And I know one guy, Taylor Youngman, he's got a nice price on both sites, $8,300 on DraftKings and $7,800 on FanDuel. He's the guy who's been pitching, $7,900. He's been pitching very well. I mean, went complete game against the Dodgers. Then his last couple games, 7-6, 5 2/3. Hasn't had a single start where he didn't go at least 5 innings. And three of his last 4 games with 7 strikeouts. So, I mean, this is a guy that's been good that I think is going to fly under the radar with these top arms. And then the prospect Severino coming up today.
Yeah, and he's in that weird purgatory for pricing, I guess. He's between the big aces and the really cheap SP2s on DK, and just kind of at that price point where you don't view him as a great value, but you don't view him as a big expenditure either. So he's kind of hiding there.
Yeah.
And the Padres have been lost against righties this year. They've been struggling mightily, and Youngman looks like a good play to me, and I think he's going to be fairly low owned. You mentioned Severino. Got to talk about him right now. $4,600 on DraftKings. He is the top-ranked Yankees prospect according to basically every reputable prospect outlet. And for good reason. He throws the ball hard. He's got a really good plus changeup, and he has a slider that he can mix in there as well. Grossly underpriced. Yes, he's pitching in a very tough environment at home at Yankee Stadium, but you can certainly forgive that at his cost on both sites. Under $7,000 on FanDuel, $4,600 on DraftKings. Has strikeout upside. Is facing a Red Sox lineup that is still without Mookie Betts, is still without Dustin Pedroia, so it does lack some of their key pieces. So do like Severino a lot tonight. Expect him to get some hype leading up to tonight's start, and I do expect him to have some ownership. But if you're looking for another name that's a little bit more expensive, a little bit safer, probably has more of a cash games feel, but from the sense of giving you salary relief to spend on bats, Brett Anderson is a viable GPP option as well as an SP2. Like I said, not the ceiling that you would expect from a flamethrower like Severino, but at $6,700, what he allows you to do with your bats, even if you pair him with a Bumgarner or a Harvey or a Cueto, is very helpful. It gives you some edge if you don't want to completely roll the dice at pitcher and embrace the volatility. Anderson's going to provide less volatility, a little bit safer play, but as far as top arms go, Bumgarner, favorite arm of the day. You and I are both in agreement there. I think Harvey and Cueto are your 2A and 2B, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Not too far behind Bumgarner. Harvey, smaller betting favorite than Cueto. Better matchup, though, against the Marlins in Miami, so he's facing the pitcher, not a designated hitter. Big strikeout upside for him. Cueto facing a Tigers lineup that is without Miguel Cabrera, no longer has Yoenis Cespedes, has a struggling Victor Martinez. Also looks really good, and he should get tons of run support from the Royals tonight, who I know you highlighted as a sneaky stack before the show, and I'm in complete agreement. Royals don't ever seem to get their due as a stack just because they don't have those superstar boppers in the heart of their lineup. We're not talking about the Blue Jays here or any of these other teams, the superstar planted in the middle of their lineup. It's a lineup that's got some depth and some quiet superstars and guys like Lorenzo Cain and Hosmer. So those are my 3 favorite arms. The arms I'm not really probably touching tonight are going to be Scott Kazmir, Texas. Doesn't hit lefties well, but that ballpark has been unkind to pitchers lately. Carlos Martinez, I want more strikeout upside from my GPP hurler, and unfortunately, the Reds, while they're not a great offense against righties, they do put the ball in play a lot, and they're going to make it tough for him to rack up the strikeouts tonight. And Gio Gonzalez against the Diamondbacks is another name that I think will get some ownership tonight, but is one that I'm not going to be rolling with. Diamondbacks have a couple bats that I really like, and some guys that can give him some trouble, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. That's not a guy. He's not a guy I like to play in a lot of situations, but definitely not tonight. Another really cheap guy. This isn't a guy that is a
Yep.
particularly talented pitcher, but he's a lefty going up against a team that does not hit lefties well. David Holmberg, $4,400 on DraftKings, where he has a phenomenal picture, by the way. So check that out, and $5,300 on FanDuel. Last time out, 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 2 earned, 3 walks, 4 Ks against Pittsburgh. A fine performance when you consider that price there. So, I mean, if he gives you a decent start here, gives you 5 innings, maybe gets a couple strikeouts, especially on DraftKings at 4,400. You pair him with Severino for 9K, you can have your pick of any. I mean, you wouldn't even be able to spend your entire salary on the top pitcher or the top player at each position because it's not possible. So pair those two guys, hope you get 35 points maybe, and I mean, just load up on bats. It's going to be a high-scoring night for reasons like that, so I think he's the other cheap guy I'm looking at.
Yeah, and there was one other cheap name that you threw out there before the show that I like a bit as well. $5,400 Drew Hutchison. As you mentioned, much better at home than on the road. Again, $5,400 on DraftKings. That is really cheap. He's right in that bottom tier in terms of pricing with the Severinos and Holmbergs of the world. But he's a monster betting favorite at home, facing a rookie pitcher in Duffy, who's getting his first start against the Blue Jays. And you'd certainly expect the Blue Jays to hang a big number on Hutchison. If he can give you 5 innings, he's probably going to be in line for the W tonight.
Yeah, and another great thing is the Twins, known as lefty mashers, they're pretty good at home, but they're the worst road offense in all of baseball right now. So, take that for however you want, because Hutchison, I don't know why he's so much better at Rogers Center. And, I mean, Minnesota, they're not significantly worse on the road, but they're pretty bad on the road. So if you take all the narratives into account, then you should spin a gem tonight at the Rogers Center.
I'm going to chalk it up to Hutchison really liking climate control. He doesn't like the outdoors. Maybe he just likes being indoors.
Yeah.
He's a
Canadian.
homebody or something. Maybe.
He likes to pitch in Canada. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Fueled
Maybe he
by
likes the beer. He's a Labatt Blue fan.
Fueled by maple syrup, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be something to it. Maybe we'll have to find out. We'll have to dig deep for that one. But either way, he's at that price. I mean, he's certainly a fine play.
Yep.
Catcher options. Buster Posey going to be kind of contrarian because you can pay for him tonight against Williams Perez, who hasn't been a terrible pitcher, but certainly not a guy you're shying away from. He's expensive on both sides, rightfully so. I mean, he's been hitting the ball very well over the past month recently. I'll point out the guy that I like the most outside of your obvious options like Brian McCann, who you can play him in GPPs, but it's going to be about 1,000,000% owned. Wellington Castillo, only $2,900 on DraftKings, $3,300 on FanDuel. The guy's been hitting the ball very well. I mean, he's got 5 home runs in his last 7 games, facing off against a lefty who struggles with righties. I like the Arizona offense, like you mentioned earlier, and I mean, Castillo's the guy that flies under the radar. Everybody wants Goldschmidt, and everybody wants Pollock, and whichever second baseman or shortstop's batting near the top of the order. But Castillo's the guy that kind of goes overlooked, but I love him tonight.
Yeah, and if you're going to fade the chalk, McCann, who is certainly a defensible play in GPPs, he's got the power upside. He's obviously raked at home as a member of the Yankees. You're going to want to do it with power, and Castillo certainly packs that in his stick, especially against left-handed pitchers. Since 2013, Castillo owns a hardy 173 ISO and a nice 117 WRC plus against lefties. So do like Castillo a lot. Like Grandal at Citizens Bank against Aaron Harang. Gets a platoon advantage there. Also a switch hitter that favors hitting right-handed pitching. Another option for power that goes away from McCann. And again, not picking on McCann. He's certainly a very good play. But if you want to be grabbing for a little bit lower ownership, guys like Grandal and Castillo make a lot of sense. And the other name that I'm looking at is Jonathan Lucroy in a righty-righty matchup. Ian Kennedy's had some problems with home runs this year, and Miller Park is not a good venue for having home run issues. Lucroy not having a banner year by his standards, but he's got a good lineup spot and really good ballpark factor. So a guy that I expect to be very, very low owned at catcher. So if you get some production from him there, you're going to give yourself a little bit of edge at a spot where, I mean, it's pretty obvious who the chalk plays are and who the secondary plays are.
Yeah, really good point there. Speaking of chalk plays at first base, Mark Teixeira is going to be a popular one. If not him, Adrian Gonzalez is significantly cheaper on both sides, so he's probably going to be your chalk cash game play. You got to like both those guys, but you want to think a little bit outside the box. Paul Goldschmidt, by the way, only $4,000 on FanDuel, which is an insane price. I know he hasn't hit well. It's only been 3 games, guys, so let's calm down about that. He's still one of the best hitters in all of baseball at any position. So I love him tonight. And you point out a guy who's hitting in Yankee Stadium who's going to be a nice contrarian play tonight. So who's the big bopper you're looking at there?
David Ortiz. I mean, what's going to be lost in this Luis Severino hype is that he's going to be owned, which means people aren't going to be wanting to pick on their SP2 on DK with Ortiz or with any of those Red Sox bats. So Ortiz is easily the best hitter to get exposure to Severino with tonight. He's left-handed, which is quite favorable at Yankee Stadium. Not sure if you're aware of this, but guys hit home runs that are left-handed at Yankee Stadium. So gotta like Ortiz a little bit against Severino. And I mean, between the fact that he's facing a popular-ish pitcher tonight and the fact that he's Ortiz and he's old and he's not that sexy name at first base anymore, throw in the fact that he's also just $200 cheaper than Goldschmidt and on DraftKings, and you've got a recipe for low ownership. And I mean, a ceiling that rivals that of anyone else at the position. So I really like Ortiz quite a bit tonight on your non-Severino rosters. But let's not throw too much dirt on Severino. Do like him tonight, but if you're going to throw in multiple GPP lineups, picking on him a little bit's not a bad move either.
No, not at all. A couple other big bats that you could point out here. Houston has a huge team total, much like the Yankees. So whoever you got there, Chris Carter, Evan Gattis, whoever you want to play at first base, those guys certainly in play for you there. And then looking at cheap guys, a few guys that kind of stand out. Justin Bour, very cheap. Once again, Matt Harvey, not a guy you want to go out of your way to pick on, but if he has one weakness, it's left-handed batters. 13 home runs and a 324 WOBA allowed this year. The one thing Justin Bour is really good at is hitting the ball hard when he makes contact, at least. So he's not a guy you would ever play in a cash game, and has actually been pretty bad over his last 10 games. Hasn't even started every day, but he certainly has the power to send a mistake into the seats tonight.
Yup, and I'll tease by saying that the other first base option I like is a better fit in the outfield and basically a DraftKings only special. So we'll get to him a little bit later.
Yep. We'll move on to second base here. Ben Zobrist gets Matt Boyd, who we were talking about. Didn't even get an out in his last start. Gave up 7 earned runs. Now in his new home with Detroit, facing off against a team that always puts the ball in play and does not strike out. So have fun with that one tonight. Ben Zobrist certainly going to get his hand in there on what should be a beating tonight. Brian Dozier against Drew Hutchison. Dozier better against lefties, but it's almost the exact same ISO against righties. We know Hutchison struggles against righties. It's at the Rogers Center, so that's a great place for power. And Brian Dozier may have just the best power of any middle infielder on the board tonight.
Yep. Looking at a couple other names in the upper tier, I like Jose Altuve as something of a contrarian pick tonight. He's the most expensive second baseman. He's facing a righty, which usually is reason to not pay up for Altuve. But that righty, Nick Martinez, is a reverse platoon split, struggles with right-handed batters, and you expect the Astros to hang a big number tonight. So you got to like Altuve quite a bit. As in terms of in GPPs, don't need to pay for them in cash games, but being that this is the GPP podcast, looking for a little bit of separation, and if you're using Severino and some of these other cheap pitchers, you're going to have tons of money to spend all over the place. Like Howie Kendrick a bit, I want to pick on Aaron Harang a little bit tonight. Like the Dodgers left-handed bats better, but Kendrick has a nice lineup spot hitting second, so you expect if he gets on, he's probably going to be driven in by one of those bats behind him. Matt Duffy is a nice option to get some exposure to Williams Perez. You know the Giants hammer right-handed pitching this year. They've been awesome. And Duffy hitting third for the Giants. So he's a good look at Perez. But some really cheap options at second base I love. $3,400 Neil Walker against Dan Herron looks good. And then $2,700 on DraftKings. Scooter Gennett, $2,300, just $100 more on FanDuel, or $100 more than the min salary on FanDuel. Gotta love Gennett now that he's hitting leadoff, gets to hold the platoon advantage over Ian Kennedy, and despite being diminutive and a little guy at second base, he can put a little bit of a charge into the ball when he gets a hold of one. So may cause some problems for a guy who's had some issues with home runs this year.
Yeah, and I'll throw out Cesar Hernandez as well. He's got some stolen base upside, doubles in 3 straight games. He's a guy that just never seems to have a price increase, but it's just consistent producer. So I like him as a filler there as well. Third base options, you're going to have money like we mentioned, for the most part. So Josh Donaldson, very expensive on both sites, but gets a rookie at the Rogers Center tonight. So good luck in that matchup, Rook, because Josh Donaldson is absolutely incredible at the Rogers Center against all hands of pitchers. So you got to love him. I mean, I think he's got the biggest upside there. And then also in that same game, Miguel Sano's the guy I like a lot. Very cheap on FanDuel. Been much better against righties than lefties since he's come up as well. And we know this guy's got power.
Yep, and Rogers Center is a great venue for having power. I honestly think that pitchers could be allowed to throw with both hands at the same time, and Josh Donaldson might crush balls at the Rogers Center. So, yeah, I'm with you. You're going to have the money, so you could spend up. The second most expensive third base option on both sites is a guy that I love tonight, and that's Alex Rodriguez. Gets the knuckleballer. And you know that if that knuckleball's not dancing, Alex Rodriguez is pretty good at crushing mistakes. This year, I mean, he's shown no rust. It's unbelievable what he's out there doing. And Yankee Stadium, it's friendlier to left-handed power, but right-handed batters get a little bit of a boost themselves, and we know that Alex Rodriguez can hit the ball out of any ballpark at this point. He's not hitting cheapies this year, so if Wright makes a mistake tonight, expect Rodriguez to plant one in the outfield, Gardy style, to quote John Sterling. We might get an A-bomb from A-Rod. That Yankees offense is going to be something to behold tonight, I think. So definitely going to want to get some bats from them. And then another name that I like is a guy who went deep last night. That's Maikel Franco. Hit a grand slam last night. Gets a lefty tonight. And he's just been brilliant since he got to the big leagues. He's that rare power hitter that also puts the ball in play at a really high rate. Doesn't have a big walk rate, but you can live with that with the way that he just puts everything in play. So I like Franco a little bit against Brett Anderson at home at Citizens Bank.
Yep, absolutely. And moving over to shortstop, it should be a night where it's fairly easy to pay up for shortstops, obviously, especially on DraftKings where you've got Troy Tulowitzki, $1,200 less than Carlos Correa. That's an easy decision if you're going to pay for one of those two. You get Tulowitzki, but that's going to keep Correa much lower owned in tournaments. In the righty-righty matchup with Nick Martinez, who, as we know, for the millionth time, struggles with righties. Got to like him. And then I think another guy that's going to fly under the radar is going to be Brandon Crawford. I mean, we saw his big-time upside the other day. He is somehow better against lefties and righties, but Williams Perez, certainly not a guy that you're avoiding with your bats tonight.
No, and Perez obviously shows a traditional platoon split, is much better against righties than lefties. So Crawford will at least hold a platoon advantage in that sense. And guy that I know we both like is Johnny Peralta. He gets a lefty at Great American Ballpark, which is a great venue for hitting for power. And it's a beautiful thing when you don't have to punt at shortstop. And that's the case tonight. You're going to have some money left over. But if you are looking a little bit cheaper, Jung-Ho Kang is a guy that I like at $3,600 on DraftKings and is $3,500 on FanDuel. So an option that is, in terms of relative to his peers, is cheaper on DraftKings, going to offer a little bit of salary relief there. Priced a little bit closer to the other top options on FanDuel, so I'm not as enamored with him there. But Dan Herron had been exhibiting a reverse platoon split in recent years. It's kind of swung back the other way in a big way this year, but I don't mind picking on Herron with hitters of either handedness, and I know you can fully support that.
I always support picking on Dan Herron. He kind of dodged a little bit of a bullet with his park shift today, being at PNC, but I can't wait for him to get to Wrigley because I can't wait to see all the home runs flying out, wind or not. But either way, outfield, Bryce Harper crushes right-handed pitching. Ruby De La Rosa is bad against lefties. You do the math. He's got to be your top outfield play, and maybe a lower ownership than he should have in this matchup because he's been good as far as a baseball player goes, but he hasn't been Bryce Harper good over the past few weeks. So my swerve off of him, one of my favorite plays overall tonight is Lorenzo Cain. He's nice and expensive on DraftKings, which should keep his ownership low. But, I mean, this is a guy that steals bases. He hits home runs. He hits for average. We already said we think that Kansas City puts up a big number on Matt Boyd. Got to think he gets at least one out tonight, unlike his last start. But I don't think that first out's going to be Lorenzo Cain.
No, and it's funny how overpricing can sometimes be beneficial. On a night like tonight, where if you like these cheap arms, you're going to have money that you can leave on the table. You $50 cheap than Harper. He's going to be significantly lower owned than Harper as a result because he's priced so close to him on DraftKings. You love that low ownership. If you get that big game from Kane that he's certainly capable of, I mean, he's capable of giving you the happy meal, which for those of you who aren't familiar with that is a stolen base and a home run in the same game. Kane is one of those happy meal outfielders that has the power, has the speed, and he gets a rookie lefty that, as you pointed out, couldn't even record an out in his last start. Minor league numbers are impressive, but the stuff does not support the numbers. So really like Kane as a swerve play. Gotta like both Yankees outfielders a ton tonight. Gardy and Ellsbury against against Wright, the knuckleballer. Speaking of Duffy, you also have to like Jose Bautista. Any power at Rogers Center tonight is going to be in play, and Bautista certainly packs it. And then if you're looking in the cheaper price range, I like Carlos Gomez and Andrew McCutchen at 45 on DraftKings. $4,300 AJ Pollock looks good against a lefty. Yep. And then going the really polar opposite direction of pricing, the guy that I teased a little bit earlier, $2,100 Darren Ruff. If you don't want to go the cheap pitcher route tonight in terms of loading up on bats, you can spend $2,100 and roster Darren Ruff in one of your 3 outfield spots. Wouldn't advise doing it at first base. I think that's a waste of an asset. I mean, you can get Goldie there, you can get Ortiz there, especially if you're not paying for a cheap pitcher. Ortiz is your contrarian play there, but Darren Ruff at $2,100 looks pretty good. And there are a lot of bargain outfielders. You got $3,000 Andre Ethier. You've got $3,300 Gregory Polanco on DraftKings. All very fine plays, and all reasonably priced on FanDuel as well. I mean, Polanco's $2,700. Ethier remains cheap at $2,700. So definitely some cheap outfield options to give you some flexibility to spend on some of these big bats like Goldie and Harper and others that we've highlighted through the show.
Yeah, and your BVP/platoon play of the day, Mr. Johnny Gomes, min salary on both sites and 7 for 10 with 2 dongs off of Madison Bumgarner. And you were talking before the show about how it seems like all the guys that have a ton of success against Madison Bumgarner are, I'm not going to say irrelevant players, but not everyday players. You don't see like Mike Trout and guys like that having huge numbers against him. So maybe there's something to that. I mean, 7 for 10's, it's not a substantial size, but that's quite a bit of success. And I mean, $2,000, you can do much worse than punting there and hoping he gets a hold of one tonight.
Yeah, Johnny Gomes has been known to get a hold of a few pitches in his career.
Yeah, quite a few. And I'll throw out a couple more tournament options. We mentioned Severino being popular. Rusney Castillo, nice and cheap on both sites. You can look at him as well. And one more guy I was looking for. Colby Rasmus for some Houston power. Anybody else you want to highlight here?
Speaking of Houston, he's listed as day-to-day, but it sounds like it's just a bruise. Preston Tucker in the outfield looks pretty good against Martinez. Really like his price point at DraftKings, which remains absurdly low at $3,700. Obviously, make sure he's in the lineup. Make sure there weren't any lingering effects. But from what I've read, it's a bruise, and he's listed as day-to-day, but looks like a decent bet to play after getting hit on the triceps last night.
Yep, looks like he'll be good to go, hopefully, so double check that. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.